So I'm up in the morning and it is day 3 of TCAF. It is super early and it's the second day of exhibitions. So the second day I'll be tabling. And I've just been hit with like the complete inability to sleep. And I get this on business trips a lot for my day job as well, where there's something about like traveling to a different environment, like in this case, a different country. I haven't really done a lot of international travel, but I've definitely had to like travel to different states and stuff. And I actually used to get this a lot at conventions as well, where I'll just get hit with this intense, like, exhilaration and energy that hits me at like 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning, and then it's really hard to sleep. So usually my last day of a convention, I don't know why it always tends to the sort of phenomenon I'm describing tends to happen you know right before the last day of a convention, and it's just an interesting thought that I thought I'd document. I have no idea if this will make the cut for my little video montage or whatever. But I was thinking about it, and I was trying to think, like, that's an interesting thought. Why? Like, why is it so exhilarating to do conventions? Because it's a roller coaster. Like, you make here's the interesting thing about to me about the process of making comics and making literature or making books or anything like that. Like, you pour so much of your heart into a book. Like, Jacob's Apartment is a book I spent 5 years on. That's half a decade of my life in like this little little book. And there was just so much consideration and heartache in the process of making it. Like good heartache, like writer's heartache, where you're pulling, like I had to pull from pretty intense memories of like my father's death, and really facing that head on. I think it was the first time since my dad died of cancer, and I'm not bringing that up for like some guilt trip or something for you guys as the viewer. I've processed and healed as much as one can from that loss. But what's interesting is, like, when you're writing, and in this case with like Jacob's Apartment, like there's a whole sequence within it where I have to like lean into that loss, and then like when I lean into that loss, I get art, and great art, what I feel is great art. At least I'm attempting it, right? But it's a very like heartbreaking process, and it's a long process. Like, it takes a long time to make graphic novels. Both graphic novels I've worked on took like about a decade together. And I've sped up my working process on them, and I have like a pretty crazy work schedule right now to make graphic novels like way quicker. And so hopefully they don't all take that long, but it's just an interesting thing. I think it's profound when you've shown up every night for 5 years to like craft something and perfect it, and all on the kind of risk that someone will read it, and not even sure or certain that like someone will read it, or that like a publisher will pick it up, or that a self-publishing campaign will succeed. And so it's like there's a lot of like risk to it and stuff. And so I guess what I'm saying is, like, I think why I get hit with this like just intensely weird experience when at a convention is that like you're now putting things into the world and you're getting direct feedback. And so even at the most successful convention Like when people walk by your booth, um, who could care less about this thing you dedicated like 5 years to and is good. um, it can be like, it can be really heart achy. But at the same time, when somebody stops by my booth who's in a different country, who's a fan of my work, um, or like a new reader comes by and you kind of tell them a bit about what the book is about, and they decide to invest in this thing, that you spent like 5 years on, um, it's like moving. And it's kind of like when you spend a long time on a graphic novel, at least this is how I will feel sometimes. Sometimes you can feel like it's all in your head, and like that maybe you're misdirected somehow, and I think this is the art process too, where, when you're making art, I think like there's moments where you can kind of feel like you're taking a big risk, and there's always this, like, I think for us artists, at least for myself, I shouldn't speak for like, as the spokesperson for all artists, I shouldn't do that. I'll just speak for myself. Like, I think for artists, it can be, it can just be a very hard experience to make art, because we're such big critics of ourselves. Like, we're constantly criticizing, um, our own aesthetic, like whether what we're doing is worthwhile, whether the story we wrote is any good. And we have to develop that critical lens to write, right? Because like when you're writing or you're drawing or you're creating these pages or you're inking, you have to kind of be able to shut off, like you have to both be able to lean into like emotion and, tap into like your feelings and this raw, like, love for what you're doing, and a lack of giving a shit about like a market or who is gonna read it. And that all has to come into play. But then at the same time, you have to be able to be objective and like step back and like analyze and critique your own work so that you are not making terrible artwork. At least that's the goal. But there's always that like, back thought of like, is what I'm making terrible? Is this any good? Like, is this a good decision? And then there's also just like, as you delve into art and you get further into like, events like this where you're like surrounded by like genius artists, there's also just that self-doubt that hits where it's like, am I worthy of doing comics? Am I like good at what I do at all? Is what I'm doing gonna resonate with people, and why should it? Like, why should anyone care? And you feel like a drop in a giant ocean. And this is where, my faith is like really a huge, thing, because, and it doesn't have to be for everybody, but for me, I find a lot of comfort in the fact that like there is value in the effort, there is value in human beings in general and stories, and I think that every single human being has more value than anything, and equal value without doing any activity, right? I just think by being human, and I believe you have like a soul and value, and I think that like you existing is, a gift to the world, right? As corny as that is, me existing is a gift to the world. Like, we're all, miracles, like walking around just as human beings. And this is very corny, and I'll admit that, but it's like I just feel like, there's something about the process of like having to, take this very emotional roller coaster that I was just describing a little bit, and then commodify it and put it in a booth, behind a table, and then deal with that roller coaster of emotion that I don't think we as humans are like designed to even, process or handle that kind of thing. And here's the weird thing: it's a whole event full of just a million artists going through that. I think some might not, and I envy them. And then I think the majority do, and I think a lot of people who say they don't would kind of have similar thoughts. But that might be me just trying to kind of like justify my own neurosis or whatever. Anyhow, so I've been thinking, I can't sleep, right? Like I haven't been able to sleep, and I was just trying to kind of process that, and I was like, it might be interesting to like process this on video, because I do like, one of the things I like to do or try to do is like to try to demystify some things with art. I like to, I get joy out of like seeing like a young artist who hasn't made something like overcome their fear and like do it and like make art and make whatever that project is that they feel their heart is calling them to do. Because and the reason I feel that way is like I've been an artist who like for a long time, like it took me I think I started comics a little too late, and not too late to like succeed or anything like that. It's just like I probably should have started more seriously tackling like graphic novels about 5 years earlier than I did. And a part of what kind of held me back from it was like this just intense like nervousness and an awkwardness about just getting it wrong and not realizing it was all part of the process. And I remember seeing like a talk with Chris Ware years ago, where Chris Ware was doing a lecture at and he's, I mean, anybody who follows my channel or like has read interviews with me or whatever, that like I am a huge Chris Ware fan. I think he's the best cartoonist in the world. I think he's the best cartoonist alive. And I love a lot of cartoonists, but it's just like hands down, like if I could pick like a cartoonist that I look at and I'm just like, how do you exist? How do you make this stuff? How does your brain process and communicate in this medium like so perfectly? I think maybe the second to that would be like somebody like Spiegelman. But anyhow, so I saw Chris Ware, and he had mentioned that that basically like at this panel, it was like a lecture at the MoCA in Los Angeles for Masters of American Comics, like over a decade ago. I'm old, okay. And he had mentioned that like like somebody asked for advice as a beginning cartoonist, and he just said like, you're gonna hate it, like you're gonna hate the process, like it's really hard, it's kind of heartbreaking, it's a nightmare to like show up. I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember specifically, but it was to that gist of like it's gonna be just like this hellish experience making comics. And he said, I said that, and so what he was saying was, I'm telling you that so that you don't feel discouraged, if you're a cartoonist and you're in it and you're feeling that way. Because he was saying when he started, he felt like I've got to just be, an unusual, like strange, like anomaly, like everyone else is having fun doing this. And he was saying it was a comforting thing for him to find out that that's not the case at all. Like everyone hates it, but we love comics, and so that's why we do it. And hearing that, like when I was a young cartoonist and like just starting out, it just gave me so much encouragement, because I remember I was like 20 pages into like Numb, which was like my first short comic, right? And that was like kind of the first intro into comics. And at the time, I remember just feeling like, well, this is insane. Like, I wonder why, like, how do people do this? It's a long, crazy process. And it turns out that was exactly that. So, anyhow, that was my long-winded, kind of crazy story. I don't know. So I'm sitting here and I'm processing this and I'm thinking about it, and I'm in a different country, in Toronto, with Toronto in the background. I just wanted to show you guys at this really cool place, and everything's somewhat worked out. And I was just thinking like what an interesting experience this is, but also like what is that like convention buzz thing? Like why can't we, as creators just and I wonder if this has to do with creativity too. Why do we as creatives like not just enjoy, like it's very hard to just be present um, and kind of enjoy like what you're blessed with like at the time. um, because I think to create art you tend to have to overthink, and so and this is me just riffing, so bear with me, and again, like I'm not sure how much of this I'll post. But like I think when you overthink, like it's actually a benefit for a cartoonist to overthink quite a bit. You have to be really good at back planning in order to pull off and achieve a graphic novel. You have to be able to kind of look at this like uh, end goal, like your end of your race, and it's got to be like this insanely um, possible thing for you, like to do this marathon. And in order to do that, you have to be able to overthink enough to like be able to back plan, to thumbnail, to script, to like work out character arcs, to allow for creation, for revision, photo references, drawing. I think I mentioned thumbnailing, finalizing and like inking everything, designing the pages, putting care, like if it's color, putting care into your color choices and thinking about like the emotional impact of those things. It's all a process of overthinking. But the downside of overthinking is it can really cause like some very like existential dilemmas, right? Because when you overthink, you can do that like with comics and it works and it creates these art pieces. And again, I'm no expert. I think the shame of like um for me, like the hard part, it's not really a shame, but it's like it feels like a shame that these things take so long to make that like even the most prolific cartoonist who's making like viable, awesome comics is going to have a very limited span of like what amount of comics they can create in their lifetime. And I don't know. I feel like I'm a slow artist. My editor last night told me I'm really fast, and that like they were all impressed with like how quickly I could like get revisions to them, and um, like just how on point I was with like getting them art and getting them files and stuff like that. And uh, I took that as a huge compliment, but I always feel like I'm like the slowest artist in the world. And so it's I don't know. It's just a weird, interesting thing, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking if I'm a young like the Chris Ware thing I brought up, like I'm no Chris Ware, but I'm like if I'm a young cartoonist and I'm looking at other cartoonists and I'm looking for kind of like I don't know, like some peace in this storm, or like I'm at my first con, um, and I'm experiencing that like roller coaster, or maybe like you didn't sell any books, like whatever it is. I feel like that's an explanation for like the to me that suffices as a pretty good fair explanation of like why a convention can be like this very strange experience, like a trade show. And it wouldn't even have to be in comics. I think it could be in anything that you care about that's like a trade show. And I mean, yeah, it's like marketing is just, at least to me, is like just taking those fears and then trying to actually use them as like well, why should they care? Right? Like, so if I have somebody come by my booth, I'm trying to give them a reason to care about my work as much as I do. And it's hard, it's hard. It's hard to, how do you translate like your heart to a human being? How do you translate, these deep thoughts that you've put into work, and you poured your blood and guts into something? How do you translate that to somebody in like a 1 second pitch. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to do. I'm not complaining. I know that's how it is. But I was saying, like, I think to tether myself in that, and just like even also to really enjoy the experience, I have to first off like accept this is an experience, right? It is a gift that I'm able to even go to this thing. It is a gift that like anyone stops by my booth or cares, right? And not only that, it's like it's a gift to exist and be able to make art, and also like we have value. Like every person in that building has immense, immeasurable value and worth, and yeah, I mean it's just an interesting thought. So I'm gonna try to get footage throughout the show. I don't know how much of this early part I'm gonna show, but yeah, it's and you're gonna see like, I don't know, this auto adjusts or something, so my face will go from like dark to lit up. But I did want you guys to be able to. It sucks. I should have sat a little further back, but I wanted you guys to see just that awesome view that I've been, fortunate enough to have where I'm staying. So, yeah, just some thoughts. Am I crazy? What do you guys think? Oh man. Well, anyhow, I really appreciate anyone who takes the time to kind of watch these things, who's bought my books. Jacob's Apartment, I'm really excited about. And like I said, I think sometimes I'll get lost in like talking about process or, like even in this case, like I feel like people who've followed my YouTube channel or followed me on social media or followed, me since like Big Illustration Party Time, like these old like things, or just like sincerely followed my work, I sometimes will think like they want to see the city, they want to see like the event, they want to hear like the live journal of what's happening or whatever. They want to see like I'll get this perception that they just want to see all of the things about the event, and I'll forget to just talk about actual process, or like what's going on in my head and like what I think is more interesting for a lot of people. So let me know your thoughts, and that's it. I'll see you guys at TCAF today, and I'm really looking forward to the last day of the con, and definitely looking forward to selling more comics. All right.